Okay, so let's rewind about 3 decades. A big promise was made about America's justice system. Bring in private industry, they said, and it'll make everything better. But, as we're about to see, that promise came with a pretty steep and hidden price tag.
The pitch was really simple and honestly pretty persuasive. Privatization, we were told, would be efficient, modern, and cost effective. It sounds great, right? A better system, and it costs the taxpayers less money. I mean, what could possibly go wrong?
But fast forward 30 years, and the picture looks, well, a whole lot different. You've got the promise on one side, saving money, being efficient, modernizing. But then you look at the reality. A multi-billion-dollar industry that's basically siphoned wealth away from the public, leaving our own government agencies kind of high and dry.
So, how in the world did we get here? To really get it, we've got to go back to the beginning. Let's dive into that first decade, when the industry really started to take root, from 96 to 2005.
And what's really striking about this early period is just how fast it all grew. I mean, it started off pretty quietly, but by 2005, this industry was already pulling in an estimated $600 million in profit, and that's annually. And we're not just talking about building prisons here. No, privatization worked its way into the very core of the system. We're talking prison housing, jail medical care, probation and parole, even inmate phone calls and the food they ate. All of a sudden, every single one of those things became a way to make money. And this brings us to a really crucial question, one we're going to keep coming back to in this explainer. What did we lose by letting $600 million a year just walk out the door away from our public systems and our communities? I mean, think about what that money could have done. It could have made a real, tangible difference. We're talking funding for public defenders, creating actual mental health programs, updating old jail medical units, and setting up some much-needed civil rights oversight. But instead, it all went to private profits. All right, so now we get to the next phase, the billion-dollar boom from 2006 to 2015. And this is where the industry didn't just grow, it dug in its heels and became a permanent fixture. Just look at this number. Seriously, the annual profits didn't just grow, they absolutely exploded. By 2015, we're talking an estimated $1.8 billion a year. That's a 300% jump in just a decade. Wild. And the expansion was just aggressive. Privatization pushed its way into everything: juvenile health care, addiction treatment programs, GPS monitoring, even things like court-ordered classes, inmate tablets, and email. You guessed it, they all became private services you could get a bell for. So, here we are again, asking that same question. But now the stakes are so much higher. What if that $1.8 billion a year had actually stayed public? What could our communities have built with that kind of money? With that kind of cash, we're not talking about small fixes anymore. We're talking about hiring thousands of nurses, expanding mental health crisis centers on a massive scale, rebuilding crumbling jail infrastructure, and putting some real teeth into civil rights enforcement. And that brings us right up to the present day, the era we're calling the modern monopoly, from 2016 on. At this point, privatization isn't just an option. It's pretty much become the default setting. The scale now is it's almost hard to wrap your head around. The projected annual profit for 2025 is a staggering $4 billion. This isn't just an industry anymore. It's become a massive economic engine for the country. But it's an engine that runs on public wealth, pulling it out instead of putting anything back in. And the new frontiers are all high-tech. We're talking telemedicine, AI-based inmate monitoring, digital mail scanning, and they're all private ventures. So what's the consequence of all this? Our government agencies are just left in the dust, stuck with outdated systems and with no real way to oversee any of these complex new private technologies. So let's ask our question one last time, but let's shift the focus a little. What if that $4 billion a year were reinvested back into our own government systems? What could we actually fix or restore? Honestly, the impact would be transformative. You could create tens of thousands of good, stable public sector jobs. We could build our own digital communication systems that are actually transparent and run by the government. We could protect medically vulnerable people, like Marina, who's mentioned in the source material, by making sure their care isn't interrupted. At the end of the day, we could start to rebuild public trust in the system. Okay, so now for the big reveal. Let's add it all up. What's the grand total? What's the final 30-year price tag for this whole experiment? Get ready for this.
between 40 and 55 times billion dollars. And that's a conservative estimate of the profit that's been pulled out of the American justice system over the last 30 years. Just let that number sink in for a second.
That is money that could have stayed right here in American communities.
Money to fund good American jobs.
Money to strengthen American infrastructure, both the roads and bridges and the social fabric.
And money to protect American civil rights, to make sure our system actually lives up to the ideals it's supposed to. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about dollars and cents, is it? It's really about our shared values and taking a hard look at the real price we've all paid. You know, there's a quote from the source material that just hits the nail on the head. A nation cannot outsource its moral responsibilities. Think about that. When we hand over these essential government duties to for-profit companies, what we're really risking is outsourcing accountability itself.
And that leaves us with one last really important question that we all need to think about. When profit becomes the main goal instead of public service, who's actually held accountable when things go wrong?